Hello, I'm Lee Purvis and welcome back to Journalism and Media Week. This afternoon we are very lucky to have a wonderful guest who is Leeds Trinity University alumni Alex Miller, who also works for the Sheffield Star, reporting for Sheffield Wednesday. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for that very warm welcome, guys. That's lovely.
I know you've reshuffled your diary frantically to be here this afternoon, so thanks so much again for being with us. Now, you actually graduated from Leeds Trinity University back in 2017, didn't you? Can you talk us through how you first went about going into employment, essentially, and to how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, so I first graduated from Trinity in 2014, did my sports journalism course here, and then went into the sort of the world of work and freelance for a little bit, which was great, you know, a bit of freedom and all the rest of it, but very, very challenging. And it sort of, the more I was applying for jobs, and, you know, some months there'd be a lot of freelance work, some months, you know, it was pretty lean, and you know, that convinced me that you just needed that extra something, you know, whether it's an extra couple of letters after your name, you know, and come back and get the MA. So that's when I come back and did the masters, which was great, and learned a lot of new things on top of the 3 years that I'd done originally. And then from there, you know, I had to go and get a job, not necessarily doing what I wanted to do, which is in sort of digital marketing and using sort of the language skills that had been honed and all the rest of it. And then from nowhere, really, it was through Lindsay Eastwood, who I don't know if she's still lecturing here. She sort of got in touch one day and said, "There's a job going at the Halifax Courier. Like to sort of help me out with that." And got lucky with an editor who obviously didn't know what he was doing because he employed me. But yeah, and was doing a job on the news desk there for about 18 months, and but always wanted to do sport. But I thought the news desk job at the Courier was fantastic with some really good people, experienced journalists and all the rest of it, and really got a good grounding there.
So you also reminded me a bit of me, actually, because you started writing when you were 14, writing articles,
yeah.
And then obviously have progressed and must have been really determined to work in journalism. Also, you've worked very much across print and broadcast. Which do you prefer and why?
Oh, tough question. I think print is sort of my home from home. I like doing sort of the flowery nonsense features, sort of 900 worders on retro stuff and all the rest of it. I've written a book, which I think we'll get onto later. So that's sort of what I'm really passionate about. But at the same time, I was saying to you before, Lee, the idea that someone that works for a newspaper or wants to go into print doesn't need the skills, the broadcast stuff, is a bit fanciful now, because everything, you know, Twitter and the fact that everything's online and everything's digitally focused, sort of the broadcast stuff, which I do find fun. I do like doing the sort of the radio stuff and bits and pieces with video, but yeah, you need it all nowadays, which it's a challenge, but you know, it's great fun because it breaks things up and everything's a bit different.
So obviously you cover one club, working at the Sheffield Star, a big patch. How do you cope with that, and what are the challenges?
If anyone's a football fan and knows a little bit about Sheffield Wednesday, they'll probably be aware there's always something going on. It's a bit of a carnage club at times, you know, that they've had issues off the field with points deductions, and I think I'm into my 3rd season now. I've been doing it for 2.5 years, and including sort of COVID standings and stuff, I've spoken to 8 different managers. So there's a lot going on, and it's so important to keep your finger on the pulse in terms of transfer stories, you know, trying to stay a step ahead. We've got, initially when I started, the Sheffield Star was sort of the only show in town in terms of 24/7 coverage of Wednesday. Then another company sort of moved in, and one of my colleagues now works for them. So you've got that competition there as well. So it's quite a bit of fun, and it's quite irritating when they beat you to a story. But yeah, it's just sort of working out ways to present things in a slightly different way, maybe, and sort of carve your own niche there.
And when you talk about carving your own niche, I suppose it's constantly not only getting those stories, but evolving those stories as well. And as you say, things have been quite turbulent at Sheffield Wednesday for quite a while. So when it comes to gathering stories, How imperative is it as part of your job to make contacts, obviously at Sheffield Wednesday, first and foremost, and to build relationships? And how do you go about doing that?
It's hugely important. It's something that it took me quite a long time. As I said, sort of 2.5 years in the job now. The first few months, I had no contacts, coming to it completely blind. It's really, really difficult because you're watching, colleagues at other organisations and stuff getting the stories, and you're sort of left on your own. So it's by hook or by crook, however you can do it. That's how to do it. And then once you've got them, obviously, keeping them close to your chest is very, very important. However you can build those relationships, and that's one thing that I, looking back, didn't do enough of, when I was freelancing and when I was at university, was finding contacts, speaking to people, and keeping those contacts. So once you've spoken to them, stay in touch every now and again. If they pop up in the news or something happens and you see that on social media, just pop in, bob your head in, and because you never know when they'll come in handy. I've had stories, for features and stuff, but for news stories as well. You'd never expect them to have come from this person, and they get in touch and you check it out, and it's something that ends up happening. Football in particular is a very small community, really, and word gets round, and then the media find out about it a couple of weeks later, and hopefully you're the one that's found that out.
So financial fair play and the breach of that, and last season, if I don't mention that, it was a mad season. You covered all of the games, actually. What was it like? Talk us through covering that final game of the season. Sorry.
I don't know whether we've got Wednesday fans in or Leeds fans in, or so essentially it came down to the last game of the season as to whether Wednesday were going to stay in the Championship. We're playing at Derby County, and if Wednesday won, they would stay up, and that's how it ended up being. So obviously a lot of jeopardy on the game. I think something that was drilled into us by our sports editor, there's two of us that cover Wednesday full time, when we were covering the whole relegation and the run in the last few weeks, was football can be quite flippant, and it matters an awful lot to an awful lot of people, and anyone that's a football fan will fully understand that. But you're actually reporting on livelihoods as well, because when a football club gets relegated from a division such as the Championship, there are dozens of redundancies, and however it might not be public facing. So that was sort of drilled into us, and we took the responsibility of reporting that story. They were relegated with a points deduction as well, which obviously wasn't necessarily the fault of the football staff, which gave it another dimension that was quite difficult to report, really. It sort of gave it that bit of gravitas. In terms of that last day of the season, it's exciting. It's the sort of thing that I wanted to go into sports journalism to cover. It was live on Sky Sports. So I had, friends and family that 2 years previously had probably never heard of Sheffield Wednesday were watching it and texting me and asking all this sort of stuff. And keeping abreast of things. There are another couple of games where, if certain teams had won, that would affect Wednesday and all the rest of it. So you're desperately trying to keep on top of things. You've got your phone buzzing saying there's a goal at Cardiff, there's a goal here, there. It was full on. And then when the final whistle goes, you've got that difficult conversation with the manager. The post-mortem begins on the season. We had a couple of stories ready and written up, for either eventuality, whether they stayed up or not. So you engage that, and then you're into a long summer of picking apart the season, and then building up to the following season.
And it's really ironic and wonderful that you're with us today, because today, ironically, marks the first anniversary since Gary Monk's departure at Sheffield Wednesday. And, Sheffield Wednesday's had 4 managers, over the last year, really. How and why do you think that's happened?
There's, I've written it, so it's no secret. I think there's been, mismanagement at the club for a little while. The sacking of Gary Monk, I wrote a piece to coincide with the anniversary this morning. I think ultimately Sheffield Wednesday probably would have stayed up. That's my opinion. There's obviously no proving that. But maybe only just, and it maybe wouldn't have been the prettiest football that people have seen. But that stability goes a long way in football nowadays. And the fact that they brought in Tony Pulis, who was a big name, Was he maybe a couple of years beyond his best in terms of the way, had football bypassed him in his style of play and his style of management, possibly. And that was a fairly disastrous reign, 10 games, 45 days. And, a complete whirlwind because, as a journalist, just quickly on Pulis, you're watching, the team that you cover get relegated. And I'm not I didn't grow up a Wednesday fan.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, you quickly sort of fall in love with the club. I didn't support any of their rivals anyway before. But yeah, you sort of watching the club that, essentially go down. And I think they were relegated in that 10-game period. But at the same time, Tony Pulis was an absolute goldmine for journalists because every time you spoke to him, he was giving you very honest, very catchy quotes, that basically we could just put his quote in the headline and it would do really well online and it would tell a story in the way that other managers, the current manager, Darren Moore, plays his cards quite close to his chest and isn't that quotable. So yeah, it's been a roller coaster.
So he makes it hard to work for journalists.
A little bit, yeah. And that's his prerogative, and that's not a complaint. It's the way Gary Monk was similar. Neil Thompson, who splintered Pulis and Moore, he was similar. But yeah, when you've got those managers there that just give you gold every time, it's quite good fun.
And you've also written about the need to be patient, basically for fans to be patient with Sheffield Wednesday. Surely that's the same at every club. It
is. Wednesday's a bit of a unique case in that I had no idea how big that club was when I, obviously a football fan, but from around here, grew up in Ilkley, Liverpool fan who goes to watch Bradford a fair bit, and I had no idea. I thought Wednesday was sort of a similar sized club to Bradford City, for example. And the first day on the job, I went down to an event that they do every year called Hours in the Park, where basically it's a fun fair on Hillsborough Park, which is next to the ground, and 20,000 fans came down just to get a glimpse of, at the time, Steve Bruce and the players and all the rest of it. So that sort of hit me as, wow, Bradford wouldn't get 25 people to this event, So yeah, it really did hit me. And then obviously, having gone through the job, it sort of hits you quite quickly how big that club is. So they've not been in the Premier League now for 21 years. In terms of the size of the fan base, the away support that they get, the stadium and all the rest of it, it's a Premier League club, really. But there have been some decisions made along the way that have impacted them quite badly, and they're now in the third tier for the third time since they left the Premier League.
So if we go back to May 1990, when the unthinkable happened, this prompted you to write a book. Tell us about that.
It was born out of the lockdown, really, and just having a little bit more time on my hands. It's quite a busy job what I do, but it obviously came at a time where things weren't going so well for Wednesday. They were looking like they were going to be relegated. And it was coming up to the 30th anniversary of when they won the League Cup. And through work, through interviewing, a number of people, if there are Leeds fans, Carlton Palmer was in that team, Nigel Worthington, John Sheridan, Ron Atkinson was the manager. He's a controversial figure. He ended up writing the foreword for the book. But big characters and big stories. And it's a story that when I was trying to learn more about Sheffield Wednesday in my early months at doing the job, that this season, for whatever reason, there wasn't even a Wikipedia page for it for this season in particular. So with everything that they achieved, they were promoted out of the second division that time. With all the characters, it was a team that, it's fair to say, liked a beer. So in terms of the stories, that there were great stories off the field as well. Just decided to sort of go ahead and approach a publisher and managed to pull it off and got a book out.
I think it's amazing. I will confess, I haven't actually read the book, but I am going to buy a copy. Where can we buy it?
I've got
Waterstones.
You can do, yeah. They're in, probably not in Leeds. If you'd have to go to Sheffield, I think. It's on verticaleditions.com, which is the publisher. I've got a box of books to get rid of at home, so if you want to DM me on Twitter, I'll do your deal.
It sounds like there's lots of gossip in there, and I know that you didn't work on it alone, did you? You had some help from one of our final year sports journalism students.
Bert was very, very helpful. Got in touch and did some some work experience. I'm not sure how much of a work placement I really give you. I'll just give you a load of orders.
And because you're a real Sheffield Wednesday fan, aren't you? Not that you're not a real fan in some ways, but you know what I mean? You've got the real passion about. Have you always been a Sheffield Wednesday fan?
Yeah, so when this opportunity came along, I was like, straight there, I was jumping at it. It was really fun to be a part of, like looking back into the history of my club. So obviously I wasn't alive during that time. So for me to get to research it as well and help towards this book is brilliant.
Because I imagine it's quite cathartic and therapeutic to actually write a book in the first instance. But secondly, it's slightly tricky if you're not perhaps that passionate about that particular club, although obviously the bigger picture.
Yeah, and I think I did have that passion once you get round to it, because it was such a great story, and the characters, anyone that knows a little bit about Carlton Palmer or David Hurst or go on.
No, I was just going to ask how long it took you to actually write from start to finish.
So this is the thing. I was initially given a deadline of November, and then it was Christmas, and then it was the end of January, and I ended up submitting at the end of March. So it's a good job I was friendly with the publisher, because I made it quite difficult for him. But yeah, that's nothing. It was the same at uni. I sort of did everything quite late. And
I think there's a lot of people like that. Don't worry. Yeah. So if you could have any dream signing to join the Owls, who would it be?
Any dream signing?
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot because I haven't actually run past any of these questions.
A realistic one, or any player in the world?
Any player in the world. And a realistic one.
Ooh. Any player in the world, well, it's got to be Messi, isn't it? That would be a hell of a story. I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah,
Messi at Sheffield Wednesday. I'm not sure about that one. We are half expecting randomly Cristiano Ronaldo to pay a visit to Hillsborough at some point, because his best friend Jose Semedo was captain at Sheffield Wednesday a few years ago, and apparently Cristiano Ronaldo is going to come and watch a game at some point.
And out of everyone that you've met, who's your favourite player?
Well, former players. David Hurst was very good fun. He's sort of in the book, and he was a forward in the 90s. He just a good laugh, and met with him over a beer, and managed to get a lot of good stuff for the book. He was cracking fun. In terms of Sheffield Wednesday now, Barry Bannon is a bit of a genius. He's got no right being in League One, and I think when he starts turning it on this year, Wednesday are just on the edge of the playoffs now. But once they've got a couple of players back and Bannon really starts firing, then I think they'll build a promotion campaign, hopefully, because it's been a long couple of years.
How easy do you think it is being a football player in 2021 compared to being a football reporter?
Football player? It would be more difficult for me to be a football player, I can tell you that. It's completely different in a way. What I do, actually, something from the book and doing these retrospective sort of nostalgia pieces, the things that football players could get away with then and what they can get away with now. There's a couple of tales in the book about drinking sessions the day before a game, and different bits and bobs they got up to, and you just couldn't do it now because of the nature of camera phones, nosy people like me that people get in touch with on Twitter. That avenue of communication probably wasn't there. So yeah, definitely there is more of a difficulty for the players of today, that they don't have that sort of freedom to go and live their lives.
It takes me back to when I was working in tabloids, actually, and knew quite a few of the footballers way back when. And gambling was quite a big issue as well back then, but obviously that's changed as well, as has the world of social media. And actually that reminds me of something I wanted to ask you about. So with social media and online abuse, obviously there is a lot out there from Sheffield Wednesday fans. Does any of that affect you in your position as a sports reporter, and how do you handle it when you get abused on social media?
Yeah, I'm quite lucky in that I don't get masses. When I have done, I don't like calling it a social media persona, but I try and be quite laid back on social media and quite sort of jokey, and I think it's important to just be yourself. And the other thing is you're doing a job that tens of thousands of people would give a right arm to do, and so enjoy it and look like you're enjoying it. So I've sort of made a decision when I try and make a joke of it sometimes, and luckily if I quote retweet someone calling me a fat whatever or this sort of stuff, and you do get that sort of stuff very occasionally, you get a load of people sort of back in your corner a little bit. But yeah, I've got a colleague, bloke called Alan Biggs, who's been reporting football in Sheffield for decades, longer than he might want me to say. But he gave me advice early doors. I went to him and asked him how to deal with it. And he said, just mute them. I prefer to block them, because then you don't see it and it's just them shouting into the internet, and they don't get the satisfaction of knowing that they've maybe got to you a little bit. But yeah, it's amazing. If you write something, you get 24 nice comments. You always remember the one that perhaps didn't like what they read. But it is the nature of the beast, and it shouldn't be. I've sort of written something along these lines a few months ago on it's part of the job, and it shouldn't be. And we all sort of sit there and go, well, it shouldn't be. It just is at the minute, until they find a way to get around it. It is part of the job, and like I say, luckily I've not been affected too much by it, but some colleagues have. And
regulators are certainly looking at ways of tightening up legislation around that, aren't they, at the moment? So obviously you mentioned your lovely colleague there. I guess perhaps one of your mentors. Who have you had as a mentor throughout your career?
Well, I mean, the staff here, there's been a bit of a turnover since I was last here. There was a turnover between me doing my initial degree and then my postgrad. But the staff here, like I said, Lindsay, without her, I'd have never got the job at the Courier. Initially, I did a placement where it was the 2014 Tour de France, and we ran a newsroom out the university. And Catherine O'Connor, I think, is still knocking about somewhere. She sort of helped me out with that and approached me, and I looked after that. So without those experiences, I wouldn't have even got into the job. And they're always there. There are a number of occasions where I've come back and asked questions and asked advice on certain things. So, yeah, the staff here, I'd say anyone, if I was to give advice on who to ask advice of, anyone that knows better than you, which is such a simple thing. But don't ever be afraid to ask that, because people are sort of forthcoming. We've sort of got a structure at the paper for people to go to advice to. My sports editor is Chris Holt, who's been doing it for 10 or 15 years. We've got an experienced editor called Nancy Fielder. And, occasionally with stuff like the points deduction and certain things at the club that we've reported on, you have to sort of go up and make sure that things are all right to be written not only from a legal standpoint, but, these organisations, media organisations, have got relationships with the club and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, you've got to have that line of communication, I think.
So can you talk us through a typical day in the life of being a Sheffield Wednesday reporter?
It would be very different if we're not actually back in the office yet. So on a typical day, we start work at 9. We have a Zoom news conference with Chris, who I mentioned, and the guys on the Blades desk, Sheffield United desk, and my colleague, and we'll discuss, map out what we're going to do throughout the day. So on a normal day, then you get on with your stories and you touch base every now and again. Towards the end of the day, you'll speak about the paper. Everything that we do is digitally focused, so everything's optimized for social media and the website. But at the same time, you've got to fill the paper, and obviously you need a back page story, which is slightly different to an inside story and all the rest of it. So that'll be the conversation. I mean, today, straight from here, I'm going straight down to Sheffield. There's a game this evening. So that's very different, and match days are a bit of a whirlwind because the demands of what you're asked to do digitally, you've only got 2 hands, and there's an awful lot to get out there.
I was going to ask what you're doing in prep ahead of Harrogate Town tonight in Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah, so we do a live blog, so I'll be setting that up ahead of time. Sort of when we get the team news, which is out an hour before the kickoff, that story's got to go straight out. So you prep that, and any inside whispers that you might have on the team, which is a little bit rare, I'll be honest, but you sort of prep that if there's an exceptional story there. And yeah, prep any news lines that you might want to get. It's a rare opportunity to speak to the manager. Back in the day, journalists had the phone numbers of managers or would rock up at their office and knock on the door. It's just not the case anymore. There's always a media manager stood there. We've got a good reputation with the club. I think it's been rocky at points, but yeah, it's about just preparing yourself to make sure that you're there and you've got enough stuff then for the rest of the week, really.
Do you remember the first match that you've ever covered? Can you remember that, and were you nervous?
Yeah, the first match at the Star, I'd been doing. So when I was freelancing and stuff, I was working an awful lot of weekends for nothing really, or for like a nominal expenses fee. So I remember the first few of those, it was absolutely terrifying. It was sort of at a lot lower level. I was doing West Yorkshire Football League and ringing managers up, and it really was terrifying. But I couldn't recommend it more. That was for the Yorkshire Evening Post, and the editor there, Nick Westby, I should have mentioned in the mentors thing. Really, I think he spoke last year at the Journalism Week. But he's been fantastic, and anyone that does want to go into sports journalism and is based locally, I couldn't recommend you get in touch with him more and offer your wares to him. But he sort of gave me an out and said, you don't have to include quotes in every week. I was doing this sort of weekly thing, but once you get the quotes, it's better stuff. And for someone like him who's an employer and for your portfolio, but just for your own confidence and your own skills and stuff, just pushing yourself that little bit more. I think the more stuff that you do that takes you out of your comfort zone, that's the stuff in my mind really that you're learning from. If you're just doing an opinion piece on a game that was on Super Sunday every week, or it's great and you should be writing, you should write as much as you can, but try and push yourself and get that little bit more, I think. And
I think that's a really important point. And I think everyone's learning all the time, no matter what level you're at. So in terms of any, not worst memories, but what would you say have been the most challenging points of your career to now?
I remember asking Gary Monk if he'd considered resigning, which was hard work. So at the time I was the number two. So as I said before, there's two of us that cover Wednesday, and my colleague Don Howson, who went over to the dark side and joined this new company anyway, blah blah blah. So he was away. So I was sort of left there, and the way it works with managers' press conferences, you have the radio do it first, so they get their stuff, and then it's over to you. And I was expecting my colleague from Radio Sheffield to ask a question along those lines, and then realised very quickly it was up to me. And it's not nice, me and Gary had a reasonably good relationship, but he handled it in a good way. And it's that thing of taking yourself out of your comfort zone, and there's no question you can ask a manager that's any more prickly than that one. So once that's out of the way, then you've got that one in the pocket, and you can go on from there.
And how tightly controlled is it? Would you say, you might not want to say, it's an editorial decision that comes down from above, or sometimes do you make that call as well to ask those challenging questions?
I think that in terms of the paper, certainly they trust us that we've got our finger on the pulse of the fan base and what's going on at the club. And so, there's never been an occasion where I've said, I'm planning to write about this, and they've gone, no, or this needs to be this, that, and the other. There's been a couple of cases I wrote quite a strong column about the ownership of the club, and this was approaching relegation, maybe 8 months ago or something, and it caused a bit of a splash. And it was quite strongly worded, and that's the sort of thing that I took to my sports editor, and I think I described the club as a clown car, and now it's crashed. So that was sort of the colour on it. But the sports editor sort of suggested a couple of things, but really very little was changed there. And I'm not going to lie, it made my relationship with the club quite difficult, for a little while, and hopefully things have been smoothed over a little bit there. But ultimately, all the stuff that you talk about the fourth estate and holding people to account, although we're covering football, we're not covering government ministers. It's a huge institution. It's an institution that people care about. As I said before, there's livelihoods on the line, and you do have to hold power to account, even in what we're doing with blokes kicking a ball about.
I couldn't agree more. Right, should we just open this up for any questions? I'm not too aware of the time, but I'm sort of getting yes. Hi.
So I was just wondering, you like reporting on a transfer rumor, how do you make sure that the sources that you have are as reliable as possible, really?
Yeah, it's the case in anything that you've got to ascertain how strong that source is. If we were to put out every name that was given to us, the paper would be full, but our reputation wouldn't be as strong because there were so many names. So I mean, there's sources close to a player, so there might be an agent, but at the same time, an agent might be filling your ear with whatever because they want to get a player's name out there. So you develop these relationships, you ascertain which sources are strong and which aren't, and that decides how strong you go on that story. It's difficult because there are, a club, particularly this summer. So Sheffield Wednesday, big club that gets a lot of traction online and a lot of attention, dropping into that. There's an awful lot of agents of League One level players that might want their players to be linked with Sheffield Wednesday because that's good for them. So this summer was carnage particularly. But between me and my colleague Joe Cran, I think we did all right. I think there were 15 transfer rumours. I think we got the majority of them. So, 15 transfers, not rumours. There were hundreds of rumours. But yeah, it's difficult, but it's doable.
Hi, Alex. What's a bit loud? So obviously you're employed to report and talk about Sheffield Wednesday, but do you find it difficult sometimes to keep to remain a fan with if you see a bad performance or something bad happens in the club? Yeah,
but I'm not a Wednesday fan, so I didn't have that growing up. I've sort of become one in a weird way. Is it difficult? Yeah, I think to keep your emotions in check, particularly with the way that they've been doing the last couple of years, it can be quite difficult. My colleague Joe Cran is a lifelong Wednesdayite. Came back to work from the Star after 10 years working in South Africa. So quite why I did that, I have no idea. But yeah, I think he finds it quite difficult from time to time, and certainly with columns and opinion pieces and match stuff, he'll come to me and sort of just double check this, and we might temper it a little bit because he is certainly very, very passionate.
Hi, Alex. Out of all the managers you worked with and interviewed, who's your favourite?
From a journalist point of view, Tony Pulis, for all the reasons I said, just absolute gold with everything that he said. Sometimes he'd slag the players, sometimes he'd have a go at the club, sometimes he'd have a go at the referee, so it just made your job very, very easy. You'll always remember you first. I'm talking about football management here, but Gary Monk was my sort of, and he was there for a little while, sort of 14 months. So I developed a good relationship rather with him. So I'll always look back very fondly on Gary.
Hi, Alex. God, it is loud, isn't it? You spoke about how you started off in a newsroom covering news. How did you said you wanted to do sport the whole time. How did you make sure that you managed to get that transition over to doing sport, and how important was it to sort of start out doing whatever you could and then build up to that?
Yeah, great question. Just keep doing it. Keep writing about sport. Keep doing it. And I sort of asked the question again. It's one of those times that I came back to one of the lecturers and asked a bit of advice. And I said, look, I want to end up in sport. I've been offered this potential opportunity on news. Will you ever make the crossover? And a lot of people don't. I was lucky enough to be on a weekly. So the Halifax Courier was a weekly newspaper. So it was Monday to Friday shifts. So the weekends were mine. And I was freelancing for the YP. I was doing rugby. I was doing some radio stuff for an organisation called Live Sports FM. All this is for either 30 quid to cover your train fare or for free. So it's such a tightly fought industry to get into. But if you work hard enough and you're willing to do the hours for nothing and go off to a AFC filed for 20 quid and all this sort of stuff, you will get there. Yeah, it's tricky, but you'll be all right.
I think we've got a couple of online questions actually coming here in a minute. Just quickly crossing over while we wait for those, just on that note, you mentioned before about publicists Football Managers, sorry. And I was about to say, actually, there used to be a bit of an adage back in the day that actually showbiz is quite similar to sports reporting in many ways. And I still think there are quite a lot of similarities. So we might have got like a line from, I don't know, a Hollywood star's publicist that wanted to give us that particular line. But actually, that wasn't the line we wanted. We wanted, to get something else. And I think it's still very much the same and very similar between sport and showbiz.
Yeah. The number of times, like I said, it was a unique situation this summer, I think. But people wanted to be linked with Wednesday, so you're always sort of wary of what you're being told.
The real agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, so, here we go. Corey, proudest moment as a writer of Sheffield Wednesday. What was that? What is that?
Oh, proudest moment. I don't know if I've done anything half decent.
Or perhaps if you can't think of anything, it might be something that someone's told you.
Yeah,
that they thought was really good.
Sort of quite quickly developed quite a good rapport. So Twitter's such a powerful thing, and particularly with, I think, sports journalism or football journalism, because there is Sheffield Wednesday fans are a community in their own, and that's a good way to. It's something that I've taken great pride in. So yeah, sort of building that rapport, and hopefully I've become a source that they can trust and all the rest of it. Some would probably argue that, but I think outside of obviously the book was a very proud moment to get that out and published.
So Nicholas, how has Wednesday changed from the playoff final defeat to Hull to now being in League One? What has gone wrong?
About 100,000 things. Look, the big turning point was probably the summer that I joined the Sheffield Star. They lost a manager called Steve Bruce, who was a promotion specialist, and at the time when I joined, everything was looking pretty rosy. Within 3 months, Steve Bruce had left. They had a 12-point deduction, or the threat of a 12-point deduction, and yeah, there was that season, and then the following season they were relegated with a points deduction. So yeah, for me, it doesn't take too much of a long look at where things have gone wrong. I think the club has been mismanaged at the top. Hopefully things are turning there. There's different people around, some of the decision makers at the club now. The players aren't blameless. There are a lot of players in there coming towards the end of their championship sort of careers, maybe, that were on big wages, and managers had spoken and told us about attitude problems and all the rest of it. So yeah, I think from top to bottom, it was a club that needed a big shake-up, and hopefully that's happening now.
And how would you describe the sports journalism community? Do you know many people on nationals? Is it quite close-knit? Because I find that everyone knows everyone.
Yeah, a little bit. There's guys that I came here with that are in different roles, some in sports, some in news, and you keep in touch with all of them. Just from doing the odd placement or whatever on places like Radio Ligue, you get to meet people there. So and they'll always help you out, which is the thing. So if you're writing a feature on something that happened to Wednesday in 2002, whatever, you have a look at that squad. There's a player that played for Leeds. You might know someone. Everyone always helps each other out with introducing people with any information that they might have. So that's really important, and I think those relationships they're as important as your sources. I think there can be, certainly when I started, I thought that journalism was a bit of a shady thing, and everyone's like out to, this is my story, and everyone's stabbing each other in the back. It doesn't really work like that at all, and especially on football, you get to know the pack really well. Guys from Radio Sheffield, guys from Yorkshire Live, guys from the Yorkshire Post, you're all travelling around together and working on the same stuff, so you might as well be friends with them.
Indeed. Has anybody got any other questions?
What's your score prediction for tonight?
That was what's the score prediction for tonight?
Yeah. 1-0 Wednesday.
Another question at the back.
I've put a story up this morning about Mendes Lang. You've seen that? And there might be a story going out this afternoon on our offer. Have a look on the website.
What's next for you then? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Oh, people ask me this, and I don't know. I like what I'm doing. In fact, I love what I'm doing. the honest, and this has been the case for since I first started out, since I first left uni or before that. I don't know. I'm sort of I just follow my nose a little bit and end up where I end up. I'd like to get some more books out. That's an avenue I'd like to go down and sort of one book. Can you call yourself an author? I don't know, but I'd like to become more of a book person. But yeah, continue what I'm doing, and like I say, if any opportunities arise, then they arise.
And final question from me: what is your advice to everyone who perhaps doesn't know which area of journalism they want to go into, but they're starting to really think about that first job?
Try everything. Try absolutely everything. We were speaking before. I just wanted to work in print. I was not interested in doing any radio modules, broadcast modules. I wasn't bothered by doing it, but yeah, it wasn't a massive driver for me. So try everything, speak to as many people. If there's a work experience opportunity that comes up in lifestyle, in whatever it might be, go and do it. Go and see what it's like, because a contact there or the opportunity itself might change everything for you.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you, Alex.